trying to juggle work and YouTube with all the things I got to do for YouTube, record, edit, get all the source material I need, figure out how I'm going to put it all together, and then trying to get it put out in a timely manner. It's like, man, props to those of you who actually do this full time on YouTube. It's no joke. This is actually quite a bit of work. And you know what? I like it. It's a good distraction from doing whatever it is I usually do outside of YouTube, and it's usually not a whole lot, but I'm enjoying it, and I'm putting some more effort into it, trying to also learn how to do some more editing tricks. But until then, I just got to work with what I got, and hopefully I can put a little bit more effort into it. Hopefully I can make these videos a little bit longer. I actually enjoy making these longer videos. Anyway, let's begin. Battlefield has always been known for large-scale battles that take place simultaneously on land, sea, and air, and have also explored the eras of World War I, World War II, modern warfare, and a more future warfare. So when Star Wars decides to give it a go, it quickly puts its own unique twist into the genre, but never quite reached its peak. For as large as the universe of Star Wars is, seeing it not have as many entries in the Battlefront series is quite a disappointment. Battlefield 2 recently saw a resurgence in its player base, leading to the question of when or if we'll ever see a third installment. Before moving on to the main focus of this video, I just wanted to quickly give my own ideas on what would make a third Battlefront the best of the best. Starting with the concept of the original Battlefield 3 that we were going to see have seamless transition from ground combat to space combat, being able to grab a Naboo starfighter or X-Wing and swing off from the ground, maybe have a quick dogfight or two just above the battlefield, and then fly towards the sky to eventually making your way into space where a whole nother battle is taking place. Could this concept still work today with perhaps twice the players in a lobby? Absolutely. In fact, you don't have to look far for some large-scale combat games that hold or held more than 64 players. The most prominent game is PlanetSide 2, which sees closer to hundreds and hundreds of players in these massive air and ground battles, covering some of the largest maps you've ever seen. Average map size in PlanetSide 2 makes Warzone maps from COD look like dwarves, and would just be seen as a small sector of a PlanetSide map. Now, the other game that hosted 125 player games was a PS2 era game called MAG, which functionally worked very well. Maps were designed well enough to always see constant action, even when you're dying repeatedly before having a chance to catch your breath, but also designed in a way to allow multiple entries into an objective rather than having poor design choices that quickly led to choke points and kill zones, leading to a stalemate. So having probably 80 players in a Battlefront 3 to properly host a large-scale planetary assault with full transition from ground to space combat with shipboarding and being able to spawn on a capital ship or on the ground would make for some of the best Star Wars battles ever, but it also seems to be asking a lot for just that one feature and would make anything else after that feel like more of a if we had time for it we'll add it kind of thing. Increasing the hero roster to include extended universe characters, planets, and major battles from the various books, and possibly including the Old Republic as a playable era. The battles from that era always felt like an adventure, always some of the largest battles ever seen. That's just my quick take. Just a little bit larger player base, or not player base, but a larger player lobbies, just larger player lobbies, and that full transition from space to ground combat like we saw in the original. So with that out of the way, I wanted to talk about another universe, a very popular universe that has yet to see a Battlefield, Battlefront style of game. That universe obviously being Warhammer 40,000 or Warhammer 40k. Warhammer as a whole has a very well-established lore and even more well-established universe, a literal galaxy-wide war that will never see an end, a universe in which casualties are in the millions daily, so many factions that are fully realized with their own in-depth individual lore, so many well-known battles dating back to the Horus Heresy and even further back than the heresy itself. The 40k universe is just begging to have its own version of a Battlefield game. Everything is there, but there's one crucial bit of information, or at least one of many, is how to properly translate all that into a proper Battlefield style game. You don't have to look far for someone to tell you. In fact, it's something that's always well within earshot, is that Warhammer is one of the most difficult worlds to translate into a video game. Not every story, not every book, and certainly not every game has been a good one. If you look at it from a glance, digital Warhammer media has the most amount of problems. Secret Level having one episode in Warhammer was enough to draw in new fans to the universe, as it left them with that itch factor, not knowing who the enemies are or understanding what they were watching. but they felt the need to look into Warhammer because it was just that interesting. And that's just one small example of Warhammer media done right. Secret Level is an example of having the right people who understands the lore, and even more important, understanding the power scaling of the world. This leads into the next problem Warhammer has, which is power scaling. If you don't have someone working on a project who doesn't have a passion for it, then more than likely it's not going to come out great. But if you have someone working on that same project who has the passion for it, it's going to be the best version it can be, or even their greatest piece yet. Generally speaking, the storytelling of Warhammer has always been a hit or a miss, with the majority of the games having mixed, or at the very least a mostly positive review, with many of them centered around the story. Just take a good example at Darktide, which is what you're seeing right now in the background. Darktide, you never stayed for the story. This is one game where you absolutely stayed for the gameplay. It's amazing gameplay, it's a fun gameplay loop. Just being a Warhammer Horde game, that's what Warhammer does best. Is if it does a Horde game, you're gonna have an absolutely amazing time with it. Same thing with Vermintide 2. Vermintide 2, although granted it has a pretty good story to follow, there's tons of lore that you can follow within the story, and allows you to actually understand the universe of Age of Sigmar. And Age of Sigmar is the fantastical version of Warhammer 40k. Warhammer 40k, grim, dark, but it also has plenty of lore for you to follow. But if you were to look at Darktide from a standpoint, or from a certain standpoint, Darktide doesn't offer the type of lore that Vermintide does, which means you won't understand what's fully going on if you're a new player and you're just jumping into Darktide for the first time, exploring Warhammer for the first time. Darktide doesn't do a good job of explaining what's happening around you, what's going on with the lore around you, but it doesn't really matter when you're having such a blast with the gameplay itself. The gameplay is what makes Darktide Darktide. Now, speaking of gameplay, usually it's not the weakest part of a Warhammer game, but tricky to pull off though, because once again it comes down to how familiar the people working on it understands the weapons in the universe. A lasgun should never be put above a bolter, not even a bolt pistol. So how could a Warhammer game be pulled off in the style of Battlefield or Battlefront? It would be quite easy. You have so much source material to work from. You already have the groundwork for all the various factions. You could easily start off slow with Imperial Guard and Orcs, both well-established factions. They have their own individual units, from their standard infantry to shock troops, specialized units, vehicles, and everything in between. Adopting Battlefront's usage of hero units could easily translate into Warhammer. Imperial Guard have so many specialized units that they would probably offer the largest amount of hero units within the overall hero roster. Same goes for Orcs. Space Marines, Tyranids, Eldar, Tau, Necrons, etc. You only have to look as far as the tabletop and see what each army offers, and from there you can translate it into a large-scale Battlefield-esque game, not forgetting the fact that they also have their own set of unique vehicles. Maps would also be quite easy to translate, and adding in fully destructible environments would make them that more immersive. Levolution was probably one of the best forms of a fully destructible environment to help tell a visual story of what's happened as the battles raged on. There's also a vast array of planets and battlefields to choose from that, just like with all the available armies to choose from, half the work has already been done for you. There would never be a time where you have to put on your creative design hat because of the available source material. Warhammer's aesthetic is that of a gothic design. Much of the work in creating a world has already been done for you. That saves you a ton of time in the early stages of design, meaning more time can be put into the game itself. But this is when we go back to Warhammer games not having the best story. The groundwork has already been done for you. The hard part is coming up with a good enough story. Personally, I don't see the need for a Battlefield Warhammer game to have a single player, unless the story was based around a historical battle or campaign, and most likely it would have to be a story that follows the Indomitus Crusade led by Robotu Guilliman, which sees the entire Imperium fighting as one massive cohesive unit rather than battles fought by individual chapters. We have quite a few games already that follow specific chapters in their single player campaigns. Some examples: the Dawn of War series follows the Blood Ravens, Battle Sector follows the Blood Angels, Space Marine follows the Ultramarines, Chaos Demon Gate follows the Grey Knights, but we've never had a game where we're following the story of the Imperium as a whole and through the eyes of those who took part in these battles. At least not one that I know of, and I have a decent library of Warhammer games, but these are just some of the examples that I know of where the campaigns are centered around one individual chapter rather than the entire Imperium, which I think why covering the Indomitus Crusade through the eyes of several different chapters, maybe even Robotu himself, would make for an amazing Warhammer experience. Right now, with the current lineup of Warhammer 40k games available, they do well to get you to stay for the gameplay, but none get you to stay for the story. I honestly really couldn't follow the story elements of Darktide because it's pretty bland in my opinion. Now with the Arbitus DLC coming out, they're also planning on revamping the story, including new onboarding for the Arbitus themselves to make it make sense. Why rejects of the Imperium are now working with essentially Judge Dreads of the 40k world. Do I believe the story will get any better remains to be seen, but at least they're putting in the effort to make Darktide a little bit more appealing as far as the story goes. Now, Warhammer does have quite a variety of genres to choose from. Whether it's 4X or an FPS title, there's a Warhammer game out there for everyone. But to solidify its lineup, it really should dive into large-scale combat. We don't have a modern 40k game where we can use vehicles that we can directly control. We don't have a modern 40k game where we can make use of every possible unit within each available faction. Like say Space Marines and picking a Tech Marine to keep vehicles repaired, or apothecaries as the medic support, running around reviving their teammates or healing their teammates or just keeping their teammates alive. Even just the mere mention of a couple of specialized units already tells you what class they would fall under, giving you multiple options to choose from, kind of like how Delta Force and its operator system works, where you have multiple operators within each class, which allows you to fine-tune your class and your playstyle, with every single operator having their own individual kit, skills to choose from. Really makes it that much more unique in terms of gameplay. I mean, just think about it. Warhammer has the entire canvas needed to make a Battlefield Warhammer or Warhammer Battlefield, however you want to title it. Everything is literally there to make a Battlefield game, so I don't know why we haven't seen one yet. Space Marine really set the bar for what a Warhammer game should be. Granted, it has its flaws, but in the end, it was a success, and I feel like it's helped change the future of 40k games moving forward. I can easily see an Imperial Guard focused game where you're playing as a commissar, or we get to play as one of their elite units that's known as a Casterkin, which are basically heavy plasma units, they're pretty cool units. We don't see them a whole lot often in Warhammer, but that just kind of goes to show that there's so much untapped potential within Warhammer. It's just a matter of finding the right people who can actually translate what we see in the books, the tabletop, just anything that's outside of Warhammer media into Warhammer media. But what do you guys think? What is your ideal Warhammer game? This is just my own opinion. I really would love to see a Battlefield, Battlefront-esque game taking place in the Warhammer universe. I think the Warhammer universe is perfect for a game like this or for a genre like this. It's just we don't really see something like this very often. We already have a top-down type style of Warhammer. We have the 4X style. We have the XCOM style game, which is where it's turn-based. We also have the RPG that's Rogue Trader that recently came out. That's also not doing too bad either. I've heard some good things about that game. It's just a very long game. I think I've heard it's around 60 hours on average to complete. That's a pretty long RPG style game. It's just best to wait and see what happens along with Space Marine 3. I don't know what other games we'll see in the meantime until Space Marine 3 comes out. I don't know if we're going to see some more Warhammer games. There might just be updates to some of the more existing stuff like Darktide. Darktide does have the Arbitus DLC coming out. I know I'm going to be exploring that. For now, we do have a solid library of Warhammer games to choose from. Granted, a lot of their story elements aren't the greatest, but I'm always coming back because the gameplay is just that great. I'll end it here by saying thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys on that next video. Till then, have a good one.